Hello everyone, welcome to yet another video of job interview series of GMT Academy. So in this series, we are going to learn how to get ready for an interview. In this specific video, we are going to cover all possible questions on the preference share. So we are basically focusing more on the preference share. So please watch entire video and don't forget to take down notes. So let's get started. Okay, so before we discuss in detail what is a preference share, always keep in mind these four important points about the preference shareholders, so that will help you answer most of the questions related to preference shareholders. So what are those 4 points? So the first point is the preference shares are commonly known as a preferred stock. Okay, when it comes to the when we say preferred, so they gets the first preference, over, when it comes to the profit sharing, the preference shareholder gets the first preference before the equity shareholders. This is point number one. Point number two is if company lands into bankruptcy, the preference shareholders are issued dividend first. Also, they have the first right to the company's assets before the common stockholders. Okay, so at the time of liquidation or a bankruptcy, preference shareholders again get the first preference. Point number three is for the preference shareholders, the dividend is fixed. Okay, however, they don't hold a voting rights. Okay, means the preference shareholders have the fixed rate of dividend, whether the company is going to make a profit or loss, they are going to get the fixed rate of dividend. However, that this feature differentiate them from the common stock holders, right? Again, as we discussed, right, they don't have they don't hold the voting rights as opposed to the common shareholders. Okay, so dividend on under the last point is the dividend earned on the shares are significantly higher than the ordinary share. Why? Because irrespective whether company is going to make a profit or loss, the preference shareholders are going to get the the predetermined rate of dividend, the fixed rate of dividend. And that's the reason, even if in case if the equity shareholder is not going to get dividend in a particular year, the preference shareholder is going to get the the dividend, the fixed rate of dividend. And that's the reason their the dividend earned on these shares are significantly higher than the ordinary shares. Okay, so this will answer most of the questions, right? So let's look at the first question and how we can answer that. So what is a preference share? So preference share, also commonly known as a preferred stock, are a special type of share where dividends are paid to the shareholders prior to the issuance of common stock dividend. Okay, preference shareholders hold a preferential rights over common stockholders when it comes to the sharing profit. For preference shareholders, the dividend is fixed. However, they don't hold voting right as opposed to the common stockholder. So we have discussed all these points, right? So if you keep those four important points, then you would be able to answer most of the questions, I promise, right? So let's move on to the next question. Next question is features. If you interviewer ask you what are the features of the preference stock. Okay, so answer, we have already, we have covered pretty much all the points here. The only thing is that you'll have to pick those points and rightly address those in the specific question. So to answer these questions, the preference in dividend. Okay, what does that mean? So they gets the first priority, and the rate of dividend is fixed, right? So holder of the preference shareholders have a priority when it comes to receiving dividends, and they receive fixed dividend before the before any dividends are paid to the common stockholders. So the dividend rate is typically predetermined and fixed, right? As compared to equity shareholders. The next point is priority in assets. Okay, so in case of company liquidation or a bankruptcy, right, the preference shareholders will have a higher claim on the company's assets as as compared to the common stockholder, because they get the first preference. Also, whatever the asset is there after that is paid to the all daters, then the first preference is given to the preference shareholders, right? So they paid off before common stock shareholders for the company's remaining asset, and that's the reason they get a higher claim on the company's assets as compared to common stockholder. The next point is non-voting rights. So typically, preference shareholders, they do not have any voting rights. Okay, so do not have voting right in the sense they cannot interfere in the company's decision making process. And this particular point distinguish the preference shareholders from the common shareholders. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. What are the advantages of the preference share? Again, it is the same thing. What are the benefits? The first is they get a regular or fixed income. Okay, because the rate of dividend is predetermined, or it is a fixed, and that's the reason the dividend, whether irrespective whether company is going to make a profit or loss, they are going to get the fixed rate of dividend, right? Next point is preferential right. Okay, so they have a various preference, as we discussed. First, they get a first preference over the on the dividend or a profit sharing of the company as compared to equity shareholders. Second is they have fixed rate of dividend. So even if company makes loss, they are going to get the fixed rate of dividend, whatever they have predetermined dividend rate, right? Then voting right, yes, they can vote in the matters concerning their own interest, but they cannot actively interfere in the company's decision making process, right? And that's where that's the point which differentiate most from the common shareholders, because common shareholders have a voting right, but the preference shareholders do not hold the voting rights. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. See, as I said in the first, initial, starting of this video, that four or five points that if you keep in mind, then on the basis of those four or five points, you would be able to answer most of the questions related to preference shareholder. Let's move on to the next question. What are the disadvantages of the preference shareholders or preference stock, right? So again, no voting right. First disadvantage is they don't they cannot interfere in the company's decision making process, or decision making process, and that's the reason if they have they only can vote in the matters concerning their own interest, but not the company's decision making process. Number one. Number two, fixed income. Fixed income. Now, though in the features we saw that fixed income is or rather in the advantages, the fixed income is a in case company is going to distribute or share the profit with the equity shareholders or not, but preference shareholders is going to get the fixed rate of dividend. But when it comes to the disadvantage, sometimes if company makes a huge profit, and if they wants to share that profit with the shareholders, so in that case, since the preference shareholders have a fixed rate of dividend, and so even if company wants to share the higher dividend, in that case they will not enjoy that benefit, and that's the reason this is the disadvantage here as compared to the common stockholder. The next disadvantage is no claim over the surplus. That's what we discussed right now. Okay, so dividend is fixed, and they cannot take advantage of the surplus profit. So excess in the profit, except in the case of participation of in the preference shareholders. So whatever the though they are getting the first preference, but they will, since they have a fixed rate of dividend, if company has a surplus of profit, they cannot enjoy that benefit. Next is no guarantee over the assets. Okay, the ownership does not guarantee ownership, over any assets of the company. That means when at the time of liquidation, or a bankruptcy, right? At the time, that time, if company wants to pay to its debtors first, so whatever remains, that will be distributed amongst the preference shares and then equity shareholder. And so there is no guarantee of the ownership on any assets of the company, right? So these are the four disadvantages of the um, preference shareholders. Now let's look at different types of preference shares. Okay, first is cumulative and non-cumulative preference shares. What is a cumulative? So if in case, because in given particular financial year, a company does not make a profit, and if there are huge losses, in that case company would not be in a position to pay the dividends, right? So if those dividends in particular year, if company is not able to pay those dividend, right? So the cumulative preference shareholders will have a benefit here in this case. Like, so the dividend which is not paid in that particular year, the company makes a loss due to loss for that particular year. That particular dividend will get accumulated and paid together in the year company makes the profit. So if in case this year, if company is not going to make a profit, or company is into loss, so that particular the dividend will gets accumulated and paid it together in the next year when a company makes the profit. Okay, but when it comes to the non-cumulative preference share, the preference non-cumulative preference shareholders, they do not get that accumulated dividend, so there is a loss. So if the company is not going to make a profit on that particular year and not declaring the dividend, yes, then that case the non-cumulative preference share will not get that accumulated dividend in the next year. The next types of preference share is redeemable and irredeemable. Redeemable means the share can, shares can be given back to the company at the future date. Okay, that means that those shares can be redeemed. Okay, so if in case, if you want to take your capital back, right? So you can you can give those shares back to the company in the future date, right? But when it comes to the irredeemable preference shares, those shares cannot be redeemed. Okay, next type of preference share is convertible and non-convertible. When it comes to the convertible, means shares can be converted to the common stock. Why? Because we have already seen that common stock and the preference stock, they differentiate themselves on certain points. So if in case at the time of purchasing those shares, preference shares, you will have an option to select whether you want to purchase those convertible or non-convertible. If you are purchasing those convertible, so over the period of time, if you think that the common stock are performing better, so in that time, you will have a choice to convert your your uh, preference shares into common stocks and enjoy the benefit. But that will not happen in the non-convertible preference shares, because that option is not available. The next, the difference is types of preference share is participating and a non-participating. Participating shareholders can participate in the surplus profit of the organization even after dividends and the creditors are paid. So the same is also applicable in the case of liquidation. So there are two thing. Participating means if you are participating in the at the time of purchasing the preference shares, if you are selecting this participating preference share, then you will have an option to get a surplus profit, and also at the time of liquidation you will you will get a preference, first preference, right? So but in case of non-participating, the non-participating shareholders will not get those benefits. So this is all about preference shareholders or preference shares. um, we will come up with such more questions, and we'll try to cover as many questions as we can in this series. So thank you for watching this entire video. Please like, subscribe, and do not share, do not forget to share this video with your colleagues. Thank you very much.